Welcome to Concept in Medicine. In today's session, we are going to be looking at odds ratio. So first of all, let's begin by knowing what odds ratio is. When we say odds ratio, simply it is a measure of the association between exposure and outcome. And when I say exposure, I'm referring to the risk factor. And when I say outcome, I'm referring to the occurrence of a disease. Take note that the odds ratio can also be used to determine whether a particular exposure is a risk factor for a particular disease or outcome. It can also be used to measure the magnitude of the risk factor for this particular disease. For odds ratio, it is used mostly in case control studies, which we'll be talking about later, but that doesn't rule out the fact that it can also be used in cohort studies and cross-sectional studies, provided some modifications and assumptions have been made. Okay, let's move ahead and look at the formula of odds ratio. So for odds ratio mathematically can be expressed as the odds of an event in exposed over the odds of that same event in non-exposed. What this means is that if you take, for example, 100 people who have been exposed to a particular risk factor, and a certain number, let's say 70 out of these 100 who were exposed to the risk factor developed the disease, and the remainder 30 who were also exposed did not develop the disease, then how would you get the odds of the event or the disease in the exposed? That would be in relation to this particular numerator, odds of an event in the exposed. For this, it will become the number of people who were exposed and have the disease. That becomes exposed cases over number of people who were exposed and did not develop the disease. That becomes exposed non-cases. It means that they were exposed all right, but they did not develop the disease or condition, and that would qualify for the odds of an event in the exposed. Now, what of the odds? So in that case, the example I gave, I said 100 people were exposed, 70 developed the disease, 30 did not develop the disease. So that will give us 70 being the exposed and developing the disease over 30 who were exposed but did not develop the disease. Now, how do we get the odds of an event in non-exposed? Let's take, for example, 100 people who were not exposed to the risk factors of a particular disease. And out of these 100 people, 30 of them developed the condition and 70 did not develop the condition. So the odds of an event in non-exposed is going to be, in this case, going to be non-exposed cases over non-exposed non-cases, meaning that they have not been exposed and they did not develop the disease. The numerator here for this means that they have not been exposed and they developed the disease. So the example I gave, 100 people non-exposed, 30 developed the condition and 70 did not develop. That's going to give us 30 who were non-exposed developed the condition. That will give us 30, and 70 who were non-exposed did not develop the condition. That will give us what? 70. So this will give us 30 over 70. So it means our denominator is derived from here, our numerator is derived from here. So if you bring all this together, then our odds ratio should be equal to odds of an event in the exposed population, which will give us 70 over 30 divided by the division sign is here. Odds of an event in non-exposed, that is going to be the non-exposed cases over non-exposed non-cases, which will give us 30 over 70. Now, with regards to that, we know in mathematics, when you have division and you want to convert it to multiplication, then it means that you have to do the inverse of the number. and that is going to be multiplied by 70 over 30. So if you calculate, you should have your number. So this will cancel. So we have 49 over 9, which will give you around 6.444 recurring, and that will be your odds ratio. So that represents the formula of odds ratio. Odds ratio is equal to odds of an event in the exposed population over odds of an event in the non-exposed population. When we say event, we are referring to a disease, a condition, or an outcome, which could be the disease or the condition. Now let's move ahead and look at the interpretation of odds ratio. With interpretations of odds ratio can either be equal to 1, it could be greater than 1, then it could also be what? Less than 1. So let's take the first one, which is going to be odds ratio of equal to 1. Odds ratio of equal to 1 simply can be interpreted as the exposure not having any effect on the outcome, meaning exposure does not have an effect on the outcome. What that means is that if you take the exposed population and you take the non-exposed population, the odds of an occurrence of a disease is going to be equal in the exposed and the non-exposed. It means that if you take people who have not been exposed to a particular risk factor or for a particular disease, and if you take people who have been exposed that same particular risk factor for that same particular disease, the exposure does not have any influence on the outcome, meaning that the odds of occurrence of a disease in both exposed and non-exposed is equal, meaning it's equal to 1. It's the same. It's the same in both exposed and non-exposed. And you know, in mathematics, aside the number 0, any number that is dividing itself will give us 1, except 0, which will be undefined. So based on that, we will say that odds ratio of 1 means that the exposure does not have an influence on the outcome. The exposure does not have any effect on the outcome. Now, odds ratio of greater than 1 means that exposure is associated with higher odds of outcome. Exposure is associated with higher odds of outcome. What that means is that it means the odds of an event in the exposed population is going to be greater by that much than the odds of an event in the non-exposed. So let's take, for example, the odds ratio here is 20, which is greater than 1. Then we'll say that the odds that the disease will occur should there be exposure is 20 times greater than the odds that the disease will occur in the absence of what? Exposure. All right, let's move ahead and look at the last interpretation, which is going to be the odds ratio less than 1. Odds ratio less than 1 means that exposure is associated with lower odds of the outcome. What does that mean? It means that the odds that an event or a disease will occur in the exposed population is lesser than the odds that the disease will occur in the non-exposed. In another way, we can say that the odds that the disease will occur in the non-exposed population is greater than the odds that the event will occur in the exposed. And that we will say that anytime the odds ratio is less than 1, then that serves as what? A protective risk. It becomes a protective what? That becomes a protective, it is protective. That is a protective risk. What does that mean? Let me show you an example. For example, if the odds ratio is calculated to be equal to 0.7, what does that mean? It means that, first of all, the exposure is a protective one. And okay, again, the odds that the disease will occur in the non-exposed is greater than that in the exposed, because for you to have a number less than 1, it means that the denominator is greater than the numerator in mathematics. That's what it means. So if we are saying the odds ratio is equal to 0.7, all right, and we are saying that it's a protective risk, by how much is it protecting. So this is how we calculate it. To calculate the protection risk, we would subtract the odds ratio from 1. So we'll say, so that will give us 1 minus 0.7, which will give us 0.3. And what is 0.3? 0.3 is the same as 30%. So we can say that that risk has a protective factor of what? 30%. It protects the exposed by 30%. All right, we'll move ahead and look at 2 examples which we'll be solving together. All right, let's move ahead and look at the examples. We are going to have a look at 2 examples. The first one, I'll be helping you to solve it, and the second one, you solve and leave the answer in the commentary section. All right, let's move ahead and look at the first example, and it reads: a case study of lung cancer was done in a population. 20 smokers have lung cancer, 100 smokers do not have lung cancer, 2 non-smokers have lung cancer, and 100 non-smokers do not have lung cancer. Calculate the odds ratio and probably interpret the odds ratio. All right, to do this, it is always essential to develop a 2x2 table so as to easily have your formula filled with the values. So let's go ahead and develop the 2x2 table. So developing the 2x2 table, this is how we are going to do it. So for that, we are going to develop a 2x2 table. So we have a table like this, and on top we can say we have cases. Cases, if it is present, then we'll say it's a case. If it is negative, then that becomes non-cases. So this automatically is non-cases, and this is what? The real case. Okay, so the heading is what? Cases, or you can even put it there as what? Outcome. Or which disease are we looking at? Lung cancer. So we'll use lung cancer as well. Okay, anyhow you want to go about it. Then we are looking at the exposure. The exposure, and what is the exposure here? The exposure is smoking. So if it is present, we will use positive. It means that there is exposure. If it's negative, you use what? If there is no exposure, you use negative. So all the people in this column, they are the cases, and all the people in this column, they are the non-cases. All the people in this row, they are the individuals who have been exposed. It means the individuals that smoke. Then the one here, this row, individuals who do not smoke, who have not been exposed. So we can label here as A, B, C, D. Okay, now let's define the terms. In this case, we'll say that A will be defined as, what do we have? It's a case. Is there exposure? Yes, there's an exposure. So we'll say that becomes exposed cases. Exposed cases. Then we'll go to B. B, is there a case? No, it's a non-case. So we'll say it's a non-case, non-cases. Is there exposure? Yes. So that becomes exposed non-cases. Then we go to C. C, is it a case? Yes, it is a case. And is there an exposure? Definitely there's no exposure. So non-exposed cases. Then we'll go to D, which is here. Is it a case? Definitely no. It's a non-case. It's a non-case. It's a non-case. It's a no case. Non-cases. Is there any exposure? No, because it's in the row of non-exposure. So this becomes non-exposed. All right, now let's put values on the letters. Now, exposed cases. In this case, we have 20 smokers have lung cancer. It means they smoke, there's an exposure, and they have the condition or the outcome or the case. So in that case, our A will be equal to, our A here will be equal to 20. The next one, exposed non-cases. Here, 100 smokers do not have lung cancer. It means they have been smoking, but they did not develop the case. Meaning that they are exposed, but they do not have case. So that becomes exposed non-cases. So our B will be equal to 100. Then we go to the next one, which is C, non-exposed cases. 2 non-smokers, it means that they are not exposed, but they have lung cancer. So they become the non-exposed what? Cases. So our C is equal to 2. Then 100 non-smokers do not have lung cancer. It means that there's no exposure and there's no case. So our D becomes 100. So we can insert these values into the table. So A is 20, B is equal to 100, C is equal to 2, and D is equal to 100. Then we'll move ahead and define our odds ratio again. So our odds ratio will be equal to odds of event in exposed over odds of event in non-exposed. There. So what we are going to look at, odds of event in exposed. So we'll look at the exposed column. Where is the exposed row? The exposed row is here. You can see here. This is the exposed row. Those who have been exposed. So total number of people that have been exposed is 20 plus 100. But out of these numbers that we have, only 20 developed and 100 did not develop. So that will become the number of exposed cases over number of exposed non-cases, which will give us what? 100. Then we'll go to the denominator, which is going to be odds of event in non-exposed. And the odds of event in non-exposed, we go to the non-exposure row, which is going to be here. So for that, we'll be looking at non-exposed cases over non-exposed non-cases, because that's in a category of what? The non-exposures. And in all that I do, you know that whether in exposed or non-exposed, those who develop the condition will be the numerator, and those who did not develop the condition, they will be the denominator. Always remember that. So in this case, we are going to have non-exposed cases, which is here, non-exposed cases is 2 over non-exposed non-cases, which is 100. So if we bring the alphabet, this is equally going to be 20 is A, 100 is what? B. If we come here, 2 is C, and 100 here is what? D. So if we bring it together, this should give us 20 multiplied by 100 all over D. D here, which is 100, multiplied by 2. So if we do the calculation, we'll have 20 over 2. 20 over 2 will give us 10. So in this case, we are saying that the odds ratio is equal to what? 10. So how are we going to interpret this? We'll interpret it by saying that smoking is associated with higher odds of lung cancer. Or another way we can put it is that smoking, which is the exposure, is associated with what? Higher odds of lung cancer, which is the outcome. Or we can say that the odds of lung cancer in smokers is 10 times greater than the odds of lung cancer in non-smokers. And that is how we are going to interpret it. Because we said odds ratio of greater than 1 indicates that exposure is associated with higher odds of what? Outcome. I believe that we've gotten the understanding of this example. If so, let me put down the next example for you to try your hands on. Alright, the final example which you will be solving on your own, that is going to be a case control study of typhoid fever was conducted. 10 individuals who have typhoid fever ate from the public canteen. 5 who have typhoid fever did not eat from the canteen. 100 who do not have typhoid fever ate from the canteen. And 50 who do not have typhoid fever did not eat from the canteen. Calculate the odds ratio and interpret the odds ratio. That is for you. Kindly leave your answers in the commentary section. On that note, we've come to the end of the lesson. Kindly make sure to subscribe to my channel, like, share, and also recommend to friends. And do not forget to leave the next concept you want to see on my channel in the commentary section. My name is Dr. Del, and once again, this is Concept in Medicine. Bye-bye.